All right. You are now tuned in to the Rotated Views podcast. I am your host, Jimmylee Velez. I'm here with Goose, Heck, Gabe, and Earl. Prep basketball. In this episode, we have special guest Earl Piner. We cover topics that range from basketball business, coaching, faith, leadership, and much more. We wrap the episode up with quotes from Ken Poirot and Wayne Dyer. Guys, if you're new, thanks for joining us. Don't forget to download and subscribe. We drop a new episode every Tuesday morning for your listening pleasure. Kicking things off, Earl, thank you for joining us, man. We appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for having me. Again, I'm extremely excited to be here.
Yeah, for sure. So actually we met back in 2006. It's obviously it's been a long time coming. And so we've known Earl for quite some time. And now it's really cool to reconnect, and everyone's doing their own thing right now. And so we brought him on. He's going to talk a little bit about what he does and who he is. But we know who he is, even though we haven't connected in a while. So this is going to be fun for us as well. But Earl, for those of us who do not know who you are and what you do, let us know.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you. Again, my name is Earl Piner. 42 years old, which is crazy to say, feeling young, but 42 years old. And I guess, I'm a lot of things, but I guess in a nutshell, and kind of in order of importance, I'm a Jesus follower. I'm a devoted husband and father of 3 wonderful kids. And then, again, I'm a business owner. I'm a guy out there just for, in the pursuit. So that's in a nutshell. I know we'll get into some of those different things, but that's who I am.
All right. Awesome. So ever since we've known you, obviously you've been a basketball player. You played basketball in high school and college, and then you kind of transitioned into coaching. So give us a little bit of history about your basketball background and then how you got started in the coaching industry.
Yeah, for sure. So again, 42 is the age, right? And I was kind of thinking about, it's funny, I graduated college 21 years ago. So I kind of, we'll skip the first half of my life, right? We can kind of talk from graduation on. And so, yeah, I played college basketball, had a pretty, decent career there. Great times, met some great people. Obviously, part of our connection is because of school and some guys that I knew who led into some business things, and graduated and had a business degree. But like most people, I kind of took the first job that was offered to me, and it wasn't really something I was into. It was just, out of school, bills, loans, real world, and kind of what's next for me. And so honestly, a lot of the basketball was kind of done at that point. I played some, kind of some semi-pro-ish, some kind of high level leagues in the area, but nothing pursuant to, overseas or anything like that. It truly was kind of out the door of school and kind of real world for me. So basketball, honestly, was kind of put to the side for quite a while. And it was just the work, the 9 to 5. I'd always had that entrepreneurial spirit, always, willing to work and go after that next thing. And again, through some relationships from school, end up linking up in business and a business team, a development team that was, kind of in that sport nutrition stuff. So it was kind of getting me closer back to kind of my niche of being an athlete and some of that stuff. And again, obviously we kind of connected there. And, things were good. I mean, it was a grind. I was learning a ton, to me, it was, even having that business degree, being a part of this business development team was school. It was night after night, just learning about myself, learning about, leadership, learning about putting together a team and just that drive. And again, from my perspective, it was just a grind. I was getting older. It was, having some success. And, again, just trying to follow that pursuit, again, just really trying to go out after it. Life-wise, I was, married. I ended up having my first son. And then life kind of hit hard for me. It was right around 2012. Ended up going through a divorce, a 2-year-old son. In my mind, it was one of those things where, I thought I was doing everything right. I'm out providing for my family, living right, all this stuff. And kind of, this is where some of that faith kind of sets in is, I think it was, I wasn't doing what God had, in store for, I wasn't, so when I say I wasn't living right, I was living right, but I wasn't living for what he had for me, and I think some choices I had made kind of put me in a situation that, I wasn't hearing his voice, and at some point, it's just kind of like, all right, I'm gonna make sure you hear what I have to say, and like I said, the kind of the divorce thing happened. I went through that phase where it literally just kind of, why me? I'm thinking I'm doing everything right. What's going on? And there was that time of just, it was, at that point, it was kind of a pivot. It was obviously focusing on my son at the time. Financially, it took a major hit there. And it was really, I had that relationship with God, but it was kind of I call him when I need him type thing. And this is one of those things where it really kind of forced me to slow down, reassess my life, and lean on him a little bit more, again, I don't know how far you guys get into some of these topics, but I think Proverbs 3:5-6 was like, it's one of my favorite verses, and those that are listening can go look it up if they don't know it. But it was me in a nutshell. I had no clue. I had no understanding of why I was in this situation, but it was because I was trying to create my own path, and just not leaning on him and others, And so for me, it really was. It was like, you need to slow down, and I'm gonna force you to slow down a little bit, And I think the great thing out of that though is that he had my best interest at heart. Again, even though I thought I had the right plan, he had a bigger plan for me, and so that kind of was what led me to basketball in a sense. And, the business team that I was a part of, because of my situation now, being a single dad and not having necessarily the freedom to go out and after work, go out and pursue, some of this business stuff, that kind of took, kind of went by the wayside. Let's just call it what it is. I wasn't able to put in the time and devote the energy to that. And now it's just single dad, what's next for me? Financially, literally taking a big hit. And so, I had always been willing to work, so in my mind, it was like, if I need to go get a second, third job working at McDonald's or wherever, I'm gonna go do it. And what's crazy is I don't even know. And this is all a God thing for me. I don't even remember when I wrote these notes down, or what, but I was kind of going through my phone and cleaning out, and I literally had, and I say notes because we're now in the new world age where we don't write things on paper, right? And I literally had these notes of like, what it would take to kind of start up, doing some training, and I don't want to say it was a business thing. It was more of a, how can I make a couple extra bucks, without necessarily that structured part-time job. And I just literally had kind of what it would cost me to get, equipment, basketball equipment, and how much I could charge, just brainstorming. And that was around 2012-ish, right? But then I never did anything with it. It was kind of like saw it, kind of brushed it aside, and just continued to live life. And it was around 2015. So 2014, I ended up meeting my now current wife, and 2013, met her. We ended up getting married 2014, have 2 additional kids. Amazing blessing. And that's again, a whole different story in itself. But one of her cousins, we're at his house. I think it was a Christmas party or something. And he knew I played basketball just through conversation. And he had a son who was, I think, 10 at the time. And literally he was like, man, why don't you train my son? Kind of jokingly.
Yeah.
And I kind of was like, hey, I'd be open to that, And again, it was kind of like 4 years in between seeing those notes and then him kind of throwing that idea. It all kind of literally within a matter of months kind of came to play,
Wow.
And so I know that was probably long and drawn out to kind of how it started. But that was kind of all these little different events that again, I didn't even really know what I wanted to start a basketball business, but it was pretty cool.
All right. So let's fast forward a bit. So from 2015 to the last couple of years, how does prep basketball become established? Like, how did you formalize it? How did you know you had something? Obviously, you were coaching friends and family, and then you made it something, I guess, more legitimate.
Right.
So that process manifest?
Yeah, I mean, it really was. It was one. And again, I feel I want to think I was business savvy at the sense. So of course, once I started training him, I started making up some flyers and things like that, and some little pamphlets. But even then, it wasn't like I was necessarily going out and handing them out. I just kind of had them on hand.
Yeah.
But the business really, truly just grew from word of mouth. I was training him, and then so I was training the kid. His mom's boss had a kid who played basketball, and I guess she started hyping me up about it. Next thing you know, I'm getting a call from this guy, and I'm starting. So now I'm training too, and then it truly was. It was just a snowball effect of that mom loved what I was doing, and for me, I think what I tried to do differently than what I saw out there with other trainers was I really tried to create kind of a unique training regimen, if you will. It wasn't a one size fits all cookie cutter. It was truly, I wanted to get to know this kid. I would do a free evaluation, kind of find out what they were looking to do. And then I would really create a training program for them. So it wasn't it was going to be unique to that individual. And then I was also willing to travel, to their houses and work out in the driveway. And I live in a pretty affluent area, one of the richest counties in America. So it was almost odd that a kid didn't have a basketball hoop in their driveway.
Yeah.
And moms love that. They love the fact that, because they were used to, transporting their kids all over the area to things. And they're like, what, you're going to come to me? So I think that was one of those things, a staple of the convenience for them, how I was really individualizing my program. And it was like, I mean, literally just popped like crazy. I'm getting calls left and right, and just the word of mouth grew. So that's really kind of where it was, kind of how it started to really scale was that one of the kids that I knew, he was doing some kind of team training with a guy, and the mom was like, hey, I have this coach, Wesley, and I wouldn't say names, but Wesley's coach, he wanted to get in contact with you about training his son. And I'm like scratching my head, like, he's a coach. He's, why does he want me to train his son? It was just kind of like, it didn't really make sense. So I was like, sure, give him my number, and we connect. And he's like, yeah, I heard about you. I want to know if you'd be open to training my son. And I'm still just kind of like, okay, I wanted to say like, okay, you do this. Why, but long story short, he's a guy that was big on the team thing. He's a coach. Let's talk about, different offenses and defenses and that kind of concept where he wasn't an individual trainer. And
Gotcha.
So I started training his son. He'd show up for everyone and kind of, he'd kind of hang out on the side. I could tell he was kind of not sizing me up, but really wanted to see, what this guy has to offer. I said, did a good enough job that all of a sudden he started inviting me into his groups, and he's like, hey, why don't you come do a session for the team that I'm coaching and provide a little bit bigger group training. And I did that for a little bit, and it just grew and grew. And next thing you know, he's calling me and he's saying, hey, listen, I got a network of kids, I have access to gym space, but I'm only one guy. I can only really help out. He's like, why don't we collaborate? And why don't we, grow this a little bit? And it got to that point where, we were like, we put our heads together. We kind of use all our resources, and literally it kind of grown from, 10, 12 kids to a couple hundred kids, which is pretty wild in about a 4-year span. So relationships is kind of that key word. You just never know who's watching and how, mutually you can benefit each other. And I think that's been the big kicker for me in terms of scaling things in the way it has over the last couple of years.
That's awesome. So what does PrEP stand for?
That's funny. It was I don't need, again, it came quick, but PrEP stands for Piner. So my last name, Piner's Round Ball Enhancement Program. So Piner's Round Ball Enhancement Program. And that was kind of it. And it was like, man, and it was just something that popped up and made sense. And I'm like, that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to prepare these kids for success. So I had a lot of cool, hashtags, prep for success, and all this stuff that just fit and flowed. And that's just been the thing.
I love it. So what has been one of your biggest lessons thus far, business wise? Was it, maybe gathering the troops, so to speak? Was it getting a space, or was it just kind of naturally unfolded? And once you made that connection with this gentleman, it kind of just, manifested into what you wanted it to be?
Yeah, I think for me, the biggest lesson, and I want to kind of speak to it a little bit, but again, because obviously I got into this to make money, right? Obviously, it's a service that's working with youth, and so there's a bigger part to it. It's not just the money thing, but I think the biggest of the lesson I learned, kind of getting started, was I kind of undervalued my service. It was like, in my mind, I was like, okay, I know kind of what some of these other guys in the area are charging. I'm gonna go lower than them, but it was almost one of those things where that confidence that I know what I can bring to the table. I have, maybe I don't have the credibility as a startup. I don't have the guy who's going to the NBA or college or anything yet. But I think, obviously my own playing experience, my business kind of background, I had that credibility. But I don't think that confidence, because I didn't have the resume of this is what I've done so far, so I think I really undervalued. And so the lesson was, again, I was getting all kinds of business, and I think a lot of it had to do with, kind of what I was providing. But then I look at the dollar per hour, and it was just like, man, I'm out here, like I said, creating these unique, training programs. I was actually, another thing that I was doing that I thought was kind of a step above others was, I was filming our sessions and then literally going and editing and showing them kind of before and, kind of a progress report, if you will. And obviously you guys know the editing, I mean, tons of time that it takes.
Tough,
and again, I'm super amateur, so it probably took me even way longer, so it was like, I was putting all this time for, again, pretty low dollar per hour, and I think what also came about as I started to grow, I was starting to get some, some kids who weren't really that interested in being better. It was just kind of like, oh, it's fun. It'll keep them in shape. And, parents maybe were like, hey, this is cheaper than having them go to a summer camp or, after school program. I can, so it was, you start to get a little bit of that, like, they don't really want it. They're not getting training because they're trying to be better and trying to, have, they have these goals that they're aspiring to. It was fun for them, and then there was that point where, I could potentially go to sessions and it was like that hour was the longest hour ever, man. Cause it was just like, where then there's others, man, I couldn't wait to get there because I knew they were hungry. I knew they were going to work outside of our sessions. They were going to work on their own. So that was a big thing. And I started, so once I kind of had a little bit more credibility, I was able to get that price point where it kind of weeded out some of the ones who were doing it for just the recreation. And it was really kind of getting to, these are the guys who are serious and wanting to grow their craft. And it really made things fun. So that was probably my biggest lesson that I learned from starting out.
So you mentioned a couple things. You mentioned, and it's an interesting, for parents out there with your kids in sports, it's a very interesting thing, whether they're interested in the activity, right? To just have the kid in activity, just to stay busy, nothing wrong with that. But when you want to take it to the next level, that's when you get into like the travel leagues of thing. Like my son's in he plays rec ball, baseball, but then there's like the travel. And obviously the kids who play travel, you could tell they're very into it. The parents are into it. And just the level is so different. And just having that awareness of the situation and your child helps the coach, guide and actually, and then obviously, Earl, you could speak to it. You mentioned that you tailor the sessions based on that specific individual. I mean, when someone's just doing it for the activity's sake, it's almost even a struggle for that. Cause if you're tailoring it for them, you're just like, what are we doing? Just having recess out here?
And that's to that point. And that's where I was saying, like the time thing, it was like, man, it wasn't just that hour on the court with them because I had kind of put this in my, my marketing and this is what, my offering. It was like, I felt an obligation to do that. So, but it did, I kind of had to kind of scale that back a little bit and really kind of take that out as this is what you're getting for your money. Again, I'd still had those ones who were hungry for it and I kind of would still do some of those things, but yeah, that was the big thing. It was like, man, listen, I want to be here and I want to give you the best of me, But if I feel like, again, and I'm okay with it. It's like, I'm okay with, like you said, it being fun. And hey, if I'm helping your kids stay in shape and stay active, I'm cool with that too. However, you do start to grow a business and you want you're trying to build a brand and your reputation. It's like, again, my thing was, I want you to be better than you were when we first started. To me, that shows that I'm doing my job. Now again, and I'm big on that. Like, you got to be willing to work in between time, just like anything in life. But it is tough. You get that kid, and it's like, man, somebody's like, oh yeah, Coach Earl trained me, and it's like, I'm okay with you not saying it, and I know it sounds mean. But that's the thing. And that's, again, a lot of that is again, it's I think part of my fault, right? Because of kind of, me coming in, and it was like, I was almost begging for business, right? I'll take any. Now I'm to the point where I'm extremely selective, and I can be, it's like I've kind of, the business model's changed a little bit in the sense that I'm obviously a little bit more smart with my time and where I'm putting it, but I can be a lot more selective, and I have had to turn people away,
Absolutely. All right. So let's start from the beginning, right? So if a parent, gets word of mouth or sees you on social media, their kid is all for it, wants to advance, wants to get better, and is hungry. What can a client expect? What kind of experience is it? Is it a once a week thing? Do you tailor it to however many sessions a week? Is it a monthly thing? And then what's the sessions? Are they always an hour, days in a week? Kind of run us through that. A very high level. It doesn't have to be super detailed. And obviously it'll depend on people's schedules and your schedule, of course, but very general.
Yeah. So for the most part, it was, the hour session was kind of that hot spot. There were times where I'd have a little bit younger kid. Like my target was like 10 to 17, or a little, older as well, but 10 to 17 was kind of that prime market. And, obviously a little bit younger, the attention span, you're not getting an hour. I don't care how good you are. So there were a few kind of special cases where they were a little younger, and I'd say, yeah, I'll do a 30-minute here. Or maybe they truly were extremely fresh and new and developmental, where it was just like, again, I don't want them to, again, they're not going to absorb any of this anyway. So, but primarily hour sessions. Again, I kind of created that package, because you can't, in anything, whether it's basketball or anything that you're trying to get good at, one session is not going to do it. 2 sessions not going to do it. So I kind of had like those packages, and again, I had these fancy gold, silver, bronze packages for my marketing, but it was like minimums was like 6 sessions. I need at least 6 sessions to feel like I can help you, and I think a big thing for me was when I did my drills and training, it was stuff that they could do on their own. Now again, I might have an extra piece of equipment that they don't have, but I would always often tell them, like, hey, I have this, agility ladder, or I have, you can create this kind of stuff on your own without this actual stuff, and you don't need to have every single advanced piece of equipment I do. But I try to, do drills and things that they can go work on their own. And I could tell, the following week, I can tell right away if guys touch the ball or not, I could just see it. So that was a key, was trying to keep it very basic, not, I don't say not a lot, no gimmicks. I see, if you're on social media and you follow enough trainers, you're going to see all the gimmicks in the world and all these different products. And, and it makes me cringe in a sense, but it truly was like, can I keep it basic, keep it tailored to them, and be realistic with what they can do. But also push them, it's always trying to challenge them. And that was my big thing. Like, listen, if you can do every drill that we do here, we're not pushing you hard enough. It's meant to be hard, but I also want to see, I can also, that's also going to allow me to see if you're working outside of this, because you're going to progress, so, so that was it. And, I'd go 6, I think I had like a 6, 10, 20 practice. 20 was kind of it's nice. You think, oh, I'm getting these people to commit to 20 sessions. Yeah. But it's a big commitment, in the sense of, like you said, kind of schedules. And now I'm locked into, almost, and it was once a week for the most part, some twice a week, but I'm locked into 4 or 5 months with this one individual. And I really got to rely on them, wanting to do this. So, there were times where, it was, locked. I mean, my schedule was crazy. I'm literally running from one session across the town to another. And at this point, when I first started, I didn't have any kind of indoor gym space. That's probably been the biggest hurdle for me, because there's just so many activities here that, not just basketball, that use our, high schools and middle schools and all the centers, that I did a lot of outdoor. I mean, literally, elementary school, outdoor hoops, driveways. Summertime was crazy because it's 90 degrees and, I had to get creative with time of day. And then obviously I'm kind of slowed down in the wintertime and things like that. So I really had to kind of think forward about the game plan and kind of how I structured it with the individual sessions.
So you talk a little bit about the setup. So once you see a kid, right, how do you break it down? Do you go from, do you already have written things planned out, or is it just you're trying to see what they have and you have some skills and challenges for them to go through so you get a better understanding of where they at and go from there? Because we had last week, actually, my buddy Evan was on here. He's a strength and conditioning coach, and pretty much the same thing. He tailors all the workouts and his program to the individual because their wants and needs, their end result is sometimes different. Some people wanted to be in competitions. Some people just wanted to get into shape, etc. So when a kid first comes to you, is it you're analyzing how well they can do for a particular drill? Or like, how are you evaluating them?
Yeah, so that's what I typically, and that was kind of the thing. I'd always offer a free session. Okay. And I would kind of have standardized drills. I mean, ball handling, shooting, footwork. Again, one-on-one, it's hard to, assess defense and things like that. So it's really more on the offensive side. And I would literally kind of take them through, and I could tell right away, can they handle with both hands? Are they looking down off the floor? So things like that, I'm kind of keying in. Again, the shooting form, just, basic stuff that I'm looking for. And from there I can tell, okay, I got to start from square one, or, hey, they got enough that I can kind of, get them started with some advanced stuff. Again, I'd have this conversation with the parents of, what do you guys, because to me, it was kind of a 360, what, the kids in their mind, they have an idea of what they're good at and what they need to improve. Right. And then parents have their own idea of and then I see the evaluation. I'm like, let's get on the same page. Obviously you guys are paying me, so I want to give you what you want. Again, the kids obviously need to, we need to be realistic for where you're at and what you want to do. But again, at the end of the day, my name's on this, right? So I think for me, my staple, and I see it across the board, is a lot of times the first thing they want to do, he wants to be a better shooter. He wants to be, and it's like, awesome. And I'd ask, okay, I wouldn't ask. I would look, okay, I'd take them through ball handling. And that's my biggest key is I'm like, if you can't handle the ball, you're not going to ever be a good shooter, in my opinion. You have, I see these kids, the lack of confidence that they have handling the ball, they're never going to get an opportunity to get a shot. If you can't get open, you can't get a shot, so things like that, where it's like, I don't care what you tell me. That's kind of was my one thing. We're always going to spend time ball handling, regardless of what you think. So, again, I think part of that was a little bit of my gift to kind of see things kind of quickly, and then start to kind of, pull that potential out of them.
That's funny. Goose, this reminds me of you, right? He gets clients. The kid wants a mohawk. The mom wants him to look like Justin Bieber. And Goose is like, dude, you don't have the hair for it. But also his name and reputation, because that kid's going to go around saying, I got my hair cut at Miguel's Riverside Barbershop.
Right.
Yeah. And at the same time, like you were saying earlier too, some kids want this haircut where you got to style it up. They don't style their hair, so like it looks like a mess. Exactly. And then you got those kids that they wake up in the morning, they slap the gel and they style their hair. So you gotta know who's who.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right, so let's switch things up a little bit here, Earl. Let's talk a little bit about, while you're building the business, talk a little bit about faith and leadership. Obviously you were going through a transition in 2012, diving deeper into your faith. So how did that apply? How did you, your leadership skills that you already had developed and obviously continue to develop, and your faith, how did that play into building your business with Prep?
Yeah, I mean, again, like I said, I've always, I don't say always, but, I've been, a believer for as long as I can remember. Again, again, I think, we go through phases, right, where it's like, it was the church phase and then it's kind of, you're not going to church, but, I still believe. And, so there was never a point where I didn't believe. I think it's just there's certain times in your life where it's, that for me, and I shouldn't say it to you guys, but for me, it was like there were times where I was just more in tune with the relationship and being in the Bible and those things. So I think obviously, you go through something like that, that was that period where I was at church more. I was kind of, in tune a little bit more because again, I truly was in this like, what in the world? Like I had no clue why I was where I was. And it, again, it wasn't ever a questioning of, why are you doing this to me? I just was like, I need answers, So I think again, when you're obedient, you're going to hear his voice, and when you're not, even though that voice is still there, you're just missing it. I think that was for me. It was kind of just that level of, being obedient at that time and leaning on him. Like I said, I remarried and my wife now, obviously she's same thing. It's funny. We were going to the same church, had no clue, so it was like, she has a strong faith and she's been a major factor in that. Cause now you have, two people who are, have that relationship and you can hold each other accountable. So that kind of was there. That my faith has obviously grown leaps and bounds since kind of that time frame, and it hasn't wavered. And it's, again, I think the blessings have come because of that. It's like, okay, when you're obedient, I'm going to bless you, even when we don't deserve it. And he's blessed me more than I can imagine right now. And I think that's, again, right now I haven't had, I shouldn't say I haven't had any. I haven't had many challenges. Like I said, it seems like it's kind of one of these, like, it's almost like people are listening that are trying to start a business. It's almost a false sense of, man, it doesn't sound like he's had any challenges with business. I just think for me, it's been a timing thing. It's been you're being faithful, and I'm not even going to put you through any more challenge with this part of your life right now. And again, I know there could be and down the road and that's great. But right now it truly has been a smooth road from a business standpoint. I think from a leadership standpoint, it's been more of that. It's been more of the, growing myself in terms of a leader of my family and faith. It's like, being that rock. Again, I don't think anything's changed in terms of my willingness to work. I think my example that I'm trying to set, I think it's just now I have more people relying on me. Again, my family's grown, right? 3 kids, a wife, and just continually trying to be that example, that leader for my family and for my, for my business, for, my community in a sense. So I think it's just kind of goes hand in hand. Some of the things I've learned growing up and then, the former business team that I've been a part of, it's little things from all facets of your life kind of come together and you don't even realize them until you kind of reflect on it.
It's amazing. It's amazing. So when we first met, we were, and actually when I got introduced to the personal development industry back in 2006, we dove deep, right? And just like you mentioned, with faith, you go through these phases with personal development. A lot of our listeners are into personal development. So my question to you is, are you still into, reading or at least listening to webinars or things like that to enhance your thinking, to sharpen yourself? Is it something that you kind of veered away from? And if so, what advice do you have? How do you digest that information? Is it like driving into work? Is it just specific time of day? We're big into personal development here.
Right. Yeah. I mean, again, I think for me, and again, it's, it's funny because, you hear personal development. I'm about to say a statement that's probably so anti whether you hear, because it's, it's kind of like you're going to make time for what's important. Right. And I think I've kind of gotten in that phase where my life is so busy, it's hard to sit down and read a book. I have an 11-year-old, 7-year-old, 5-year-old, trying to grow a bit. So I say all that to say it's been hard to do the reading like I want. So yeah, I'm into the podcast and I follow some, obviously leadership principle like podcasts and things like that. It's kind of been more of my book, if you will. I mean, the book I've been reading the most is the Bible, in the sense that that's between that and my daily devotions and things like that. Really, the only books that I've been reading lately are more parenting stuff.
Wow.
Nice. Which is, again, my wife and I, because now, basically we're a part of a step family, right? So that's kind of been our challenge with her kind of integrating into, with my older son. And again, there's a whole different story with kind of that, that situation. But, so a lot of it's been that kind of stuff of, some of just the from a biblical perspective and parenting and kind of the step parenting thing. And so, in a sense, it's still that self-development and personal development, but it's not really geared towards the business side of things. It's more just, the leadership within the home type of stuff that I've been kind of more in tune with lately, because it's kind of been the need right now for the phase that our kids are in, and us just making sure that we're doing what we need to do to be the examples for our family.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I mean, what better information to digest if, than things that are actually applicable to your situation. And all of that is, personal development. That is growing the relationships with your wife, with your children. That's all, that's literally what we want. That's gold to us, and for us to surround ourselves around people who are trying at least to improve themselves, let alone, not, expecting anyone to read, 40 books in a month or anything like that. It's just a pursuit. It's like you're going through it. And, part of personal development isn't just so for, I'm not saying this to Earl, I'm saying this to the listeners, isn't just you reading a book and listen to a webinar. Part of it is experiencing something and actually while you're driving into work, thinking and processing things and how could I have handled that better? Or how could I have, done something differently to improve that particular situation? So it's not necessarily just reading, it's actually working through those ideas and those problems within yourself, and then the next time it happens, apply those lessons. So all this stuff is, every little bit of it helps. It's because then you have the guy, and I was the guy at one point, reading 50 books a month and applying nothing. I was just running through the books just to say I read a dang book. So it's very different than then you got one guy, for example, just reading the Bible or one book that impacted that person. They read that book and they keep reading that same exact book or that same verse or that same, whatever, a piece of scripture. And they're constantly changing. They're constantly improving. So it doesn't take much. Right. So I definitely appreciate that. All right. So one of the questions we like to ask our guests, obviously you have kids, so this is our favorite because we all have kids. What's the best way that works for you? The work-life balance. How do you turn it off and turn it back on?
Yeah. I can't say I'm perfect at it. I think I'm conscious of it. And I've been conscious of it, which has helped. I think, we're in this world now, especially COVID and all that stuff, where a lot of people are working from home. I still have the full-time gig, right? And that's a whole different world. But I think I've always, since all of our kids, since they've been, since I've had them, I've pretty much worked from home to some degree, Mm-hmm. And so I think they see me, I'm always here.
That's awesome.
And so it is. And I think my wife's done it. She's big on this, is that, they need, it sounds counter, but it's kind of like, you need to let them know you're not always accessible. They see you and they don't realize you're working, it's like Daddy's always here. And so there was those times where, it would kind of bleed, I'm working, but then it's like, I'd come down and hang out and do something. And then it's like, it was almost confusing to them, kind of like, well, you're telling me he's working, but he's down here, messing around with me or playing around with me. Right. And then I'm shutting the work computer off and I'm running out to go do training and back and forth, and there were times again where it was like, I'd have those moments where, I'm on the way out the door and the kid's like, "Where are you going, Dad?" And I'm like, "Oh, going to basketball training," and then it got to points where I'm like leaving and they're like, "You're going to basketball training, aren't you?" You know what I mean? And it was almost like that tone of like, they were sad, but then it's like, I got to give all the credit to my wife, because she was so big on always reinforcing that, Daddy's going out to work so that we can have the stuff that we have. And always just edifying me and my work ethic to instill in them, the values they should have. But it also still was like, man, I go out the house feeling bad that, I wasn't able to hang out with them today like I did. And so, a lot of that was kind of having those, those fine points of, kind of talking to her like, hey, do you want me to, have trainings back to back one day, and then I have a couple of days free, or would you rather me do one here, one next day, where I'm not out all the time in the evening. And so a lot of it was conversation with her, kind of what would help her out. But then some of it was just setting boundaries. Like, when I was training, I'm like, I'm not doing Friday nights. Fridays off limits, as much as possible, even the weekends. It was like, I'll do as much stuff in the days, weeknights and, but I kind of had those days where it was set for just the family, and things have changed now because our kids are involved in sports and all of that. But it truly was kind of setting those boundaries. And again, even with my wife, we it's funny because I was telling you, I got to get creative today because, we kind of have that set bedtime at 8:00 for the most times. I mean, that's it, so because we value our time, nothing but sitting on the couch and hanging out, watching whatever we watch, for a couple hours before bed. But, again, I think it's still a work in progress, but I think part of it was just being conscious of you need to have that balance. You need to have that cutoff and start time and boundaries and things like that, and it's not just hustling to get that next client. Is it really worth it in the grand scheme,
I love it. I love it. Setting boundaries, having that open discussion. Dude, because you're right, man. I mean, sometimes, we get into this, you can get into a groove. I shouldn't say we. You can get into that groove of like, man, I'm making things happen. I'm doing X, Y, and Z, blah, blah, blah. And if you don't have that little conversation to set, and it's expectations, right? Because my expectations, I'm thinking like, dang, everyone should be proud. You should be happy. I'm making it happen. And in the back of their mind, like, I expected you to be here. So our expectations are totally different. And then all of a sudden we're looking at each other like, you're mad at me and I'm mad at you. The kids are confused. But and everyone's intentions were well, right? And so that's the thing that, to take home. Everyone intended to, do well or act, accordingly, but our expectations were totally different. So that 5-minute conversation, say, hey, and planning things out. We have like a family calendar just so we're all aware of what's going on and when. Right. Just for that exact reason, because I would get all, puzzled or like, where are you going? Now where are you going? Pull one kid, you got to stay with him. And a lot of it's just communication, just being on the same page. You don't have to be perfect, like you said. Don't have to be perfect. And it's always a work in progress. But communication is huge. It is so huge. You stop yourself from so many arguments.
For sure. For sure. I think too, now I'm at that point too, because my two oldest play ball. So now I'm able to include them. Again, I'm doing a lot more group trainings. Just that economically, it makes more sense to, do that over the onesies and twosies here and there. So I'm able to include them in my group stuff, which is nice. It's they're getting that, that access and they're hanging out with that at the same time. So that's been kind of a benefit too, now that they're a little bit older and able to do that kind of stuff too, which is pretty cool.
I love that. Yeah, that's a win-win. All right, 2 more questions and then we'll wrap this bad boy up. So what about your childhood contributed to your current success? So was it like, like watching your parents
100%,
work hard or just put in that work ethic? Or maybe it was another family member or whatever, someone you looked up to, something about your childhood you think is still every day contributes to your current success.
Right. Yeah, no, 100% my dad. And let me give my mom some love first off. She was, extremely loving, supportive, encouraging, anything that we did.
Absolutely.
I think, but just as a man, seeing my dad, literally his work ethic is even to this day, it's unmatched. I mean, he was, working a graveyard shift. He was coaching our teams. He was, involved in some of the, he's like a town official, and then you can name other things. So, I mean, his work ethic, it was a constant grind for him. He was out. He actually was in a business as well, a side business. Yeah. And as busy as he was, though, I never he was always present. Sounds crazy, but it was like he never missed games. He coached our teams. He was always there in that sense. And so I think that's a huge thing, was seeing his work ethic, his presence, and then just his servant's heart. I mean, literally knew everybody. He'd do anything for anybody. And I think, again, at the time I didn't, again, and that's part of those things where, I do walk out of the house and I hear my kids say, "Oh, you're going to basketball again," where I'm like, in that moment, you kind of feel that guilt, but then I'm also thinking back, like, they're not going to remember that night. They're going to remember, like me, remember how, like, my dad grinded for us and provided for us. And so that's the biggest thing, is that's probably the biggest thing for my childhood success that I was able to, emulate in my mind and kind of do the things that he's doing. And hopefully my kids will, think of those things the same way I think of them with him.
I love it. All right, and our final question, and then we'll allow you to share your social media handles or websites, whatever you want to share, so people can connect with you. What is your recommendation to anyone trying to jump into the coaching business? So we have some people who are on the fence on what they want to do. Or should they start that new little venture? Should they start that new project? If someone's trying to get into the coaching business, what's, one or two pieces of advice you would give them based off your experience?
Yeah. I mean, again, I think number one is do it for the right reasons. Right. And what I'd say by that is, you're, especially if you're dealing with, young kids. I mean, you're so it's just most, just the influence that you can have that you might not even know, doing it for the right reasons. Again, I kind of go back to, you just mentioned social media, and it's like, I know I've already mentioned I do videos here and there, but it was my videos were more of I want to show you progress. Right. And, I'll post some stuff and things obviously to kind of show, but I see I see a lot of trainers out there that is literally, they're trying to get that one shot, and it's to promote them. And it's trying to, again, there, or it's they had a session with this guy 10 years ago, and now he's in the training, and it's like, oh, that's my guy. That's my day one. And, all these things where it's just like, are you really doing this because you want to see a kid get better, or are you, you're trying to be, hoping you get that NBA look, So I think number one is doing it for the right reasons, and in this industry, it has to be about the kids and helping them get better. And then really just kind of blaze your own trail. It's like, everybody has their own definition of success. And I think for me, what's been great is that I didn't kind of necessarily go the normal path. I think I mentioned earlier, probably my biggest obstacle is the gym space. And again, because of relationships, I've kind of gotten some of that and kind of more than I expected, if you will. But initially coming in, it was kind of like, I was reaching out to people, and it was like, hey, we'll give you all the space you want if you coach one of our teams or, one of our AAU teams. And it was like, there was that moment where I was like, oh, that sounds good. But then I'm like, okay, I do that. Now I'm every weekend away from my family, at these tournaments because I wanted somebody's gym space, and I chose not to do that. So maybe my growth was a little slower. Maybe it wasn't, but I'm glad I didn't go that path. I was able to kind of go at my own pace and do it the right way. And I think for me, it's going to be a little bit, the exponential growth is going to be better than kind of conforming to that normal way of getting in the door, So that's it. Do it for the right reasons. Be willing to blaze your own trail. Especially if you believe that trail can work. And then obviously, faith, if that's your route. Obviously lean on the Lord. And it's all gonna come together.
Well said. Well said. All right. So if folks wanted to reach out to you, wanted to connect to you, or connect with you, what's the best way? Is it social media? Is it on Instagram? Is it some other format? If you don't mind sharing your handle.
Yeah, Instagram's the way right now. Yes, I'm at Prep B-Ball, PrepBBAL. I just had to think about how to spell it, right? Prep B-Ball. I'm not used to giving it out like that, right? But yeah, at Prep B-Ball.
All right, so we like to wrap things up with quotes, and the first one is by Ken Poirot. Today is your opportunity to build the tomorrow you want. Today is the opportunity to build the tomorrow you want. And the second one by Wayne Dyer. If you believe it'll work out, you'll see opportunities. If you don't believe it'll work out, you'll see obstacles. All right, so there you have it.
Awesome. Guys, thanks again for joining us. The Rotated Views podcast was produced for self-development purposes. Huge shout out to our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by the Blessed Lifestyle brand. That is BL3SSED.com. Also sponsored by the Motivation Files Unleashed. This motivational mixtape will be your fuel for success. Available on all platforms. Guys, don't forget to visit the website, JimmyleeVelez.com. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Rotated Views. If you have any inquiries or questions, email us at info@JimmyleeVelez.com. On behalf of myself and the rest of the crew, we wish you massive success. Stay blessed.